So first of all, the equation always has to be equal to 0, because what we're doing is we're finding the zeros of the equation. So just as a reminder, what that would mean, if we were graphing it, the zeros are like where the parabola might hit the x-axis. That's why they're called the zeros, and that's why the equation needs to be set equal to 0. So before, in the good old days when we were solving basic equations, you would just combine like terms and solve for A, but you can't combine like terms here because they're obviously not like terms. So that's what the whole purpose of learning how to factor is, to learn how to solve quadratic equations like this, because you can't solve them the regular way. You're going to have to solve them by factoring. So you're going to treat it at first just like this were a regular old expression that we've been factoring today. So forget about this part for a second and just focus on that part. So if it were an expression that you're just trying to factor, what would be your very first step?
Find the GCF.
Exactly. So is there a greatest common factor?
No.
Oh, no, you're right. I'm correct. Okay. So there's not a greatest common factor. So what is the next question?
Is it a special one?
Yeah, is it special? So is that special?
No.
Nope. Neither one of those is a perfect square. So what's the next thing?
Is it a quadratic trinomial?
Yes, it is. Is A equal to 1?
No.
No. So this is where I'm just flat out telling you, it is fine to use calculators for this one, because this one's going to be a pain in the butt. So what is the first thing that you're going to have to do to start off your chart so that you can figure out what numbers you're looking for?
Wait, can you say that again?
So we're going to make our chart, and we've got to find our numbers to use to split up that binomial. So what's the first thing we have to do to figure out, like, what number do we need to get to multiply by there?
Combine A and C?
Yeah, so multiply A and C. So what is that when you multiply A and C? It's a big number. It's perfectly fine to use your calculator.
252.
What is it?
I said that weird. 252.
Negative 252. That sounds right. I'm gonna trust you for now and assume that that's right. Okay, so we got to figure out, what do we multiply to get negative 252? That we add to get 19, or negative 19. So we're obviously 1 and 252. 2 and what? 126. 3 and let's see. That's gonna.
84.
Thank you. Okay, will 4 work? It does.
Yeah, 63.
Okay. Is 5 gonna work?
No.
Okay. 6.
Yeah, 32.
Yep. So the rule is just if 2 and 3 both go into the number, then you know that 6 is going to go into it too. Just FYI. So you can go ahead and try that one out. Okay, what about 7?
Yeah, 36.
Yeah.
Okay, what about 8?
Well, I mean,
No.
Okay. What about 9?
Yeah, 28.
So 9 times 28. And 10 obviously doesn't go in there. 11 doesn't go in there. But I'm actually going to go ahead and stop just for the sake of time, because I know that I've got the right one, because one of them has to be a positive and one of them has to be a negative, right? Because it's a negative 252. So if this is a positive 9 and that's a negative 28, there we go. Those are the two that add up to negative. They add up to negative 19, right? I'm not losing it. Okay, I think. Yeah, okay. So you're going to use that to break open your 2. So 9a minus 28a. So you already know this part. So we went through all that work to get it into 4 terms so that now we can factor by grouping. So I'm going to group the first term, and I know you know how to do this part, so I'm going to kind of hustle a little bit. So I'm going to factor a 3a out of that first one, which means I have 7a plus 3 left over. And then out of this one, I'm going to factor a 4. And I can tell that I want this to be a positive because that's a positive 7a right there. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and factor out, save myself time, and factor out a negative 4 because I know I'm going to want that leftover to be a positive. So if I do that, that's 7a plus 3. So we know that we are finally almost done because those binomials are the same. So I'm going to factor out that 7a plus 3 and the 3a minus 4. So far on this Friday classwork, you're not doing anything you haven't already been doing. Okay, you factored it just like you've been doing. But here's where you've got to remember now you're actually solving an equation. You're not just factoring the expression. So I'm going to rewrite this kind of over here to the side. So we factored it. So now we have 7a plus 3 times 3a minus 4. And that has to be equal to 0. So obviously, anything times 0 is 0. So for this equation to be true, either this binomial needs to be equal to 0 or that binomial needs to be equal to 0. Either one could be true. So we've got to set ourselves up 2 equations. Does that make sense why we have to, like why one of those has to be equal to 0?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to set up one equation. We're using the first binomial. So 7a plus 3 is equal to 0. And then I'm going to set up an equation with the other one, 3a minus 4 is equal to 0. And then we're just going to solve them like we did regular equations. So for the blue one, I'm going to do minus 3 on both sides. 7a is equal to negative 3. Divide both sides by 7. So, and remember we like to keep it as a fraction. So a is going to be equal to negative 3 over 7 because we don't want to divide it into a decimal. Then I'm going to do the same thing down here. 3a is equal to 4. Divide both sides by 3. Again, leave it as a fraction. So my other solution is 4/3. And it's a little bit tricky putting it in. So we found our 2 solutions. So this is the only thing that's new right there, is this part right here. You're still factoring to solve. And there's a Google form for you to use to check. And you know how sometimes it's kind of picky, you know, because of the formatting or whatever. So when you put it in there, make sure you do it with the bracket, those ugly brackets, you know, that I can't draw. Put the smaller one in first. So in this case, you would type negative 3 over 7 in first. Then you would type in 4 over 3 second, and then do the ugly bracket at the end. So once you're ready to get to the Friday classwork, you're still just factoring. The only difference is now you got to do one extra step to solve it.